Israel has had yet another incursion into Gaza, of course, which we've been covering on the show for weeks here. And they say it's because Hamas is firing rockets. They just arrested the guy who killed the 3 Israeli teenagers, which they claimed was the beginning of this whole mess. They said Hamas captured them. Hamas never took responsibility for that, and there's apparently evidence that the Israelis have that it was not Hamas. At best, it was a Hamas offshoot not sanctioned by Hamas. And by the way, that offshoot didn't want peace. Okay, they're also massive right-wingers. They're for war, and they were afraid that Hamas was going to agree to a peace deal because they had just joined up with Fatah, who's more peaceful in the West Bank. So we have right-wingers on the Palestinian side trying to drive us into war. They kidnapped 3 Israelis and killed them, right? So now, apparently, according to reporting out of Israel, Netanyahu's government knows that. They pretend that they don't know that the kids are killed in order to go arrest hundreds of people from Hamas who didn't actually do it. Now we arrest the actual guy who did it. It turns out he's not in Gaza at all. He's in the West Bank. So there's a question as to what was the real motivation of both sides. Now, I explained the Palestinian side there. Let's go to the Israeli side. Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu has never agreed to a peace deal. And as you're going to see from his quotes here, doesn't want a peace deal. So, oh, look at that. We have hostilities. And I arrested hundreds of people from Hamas for a crime that it looks like we kind of have evidence that they didn't do. It was their splinter group, and we got them after the war is basically completed for now because Israel has started withdrawing ground troops. And so why did you do it anyway? Well, here's a possible explanation from Shmuel Sandler. He says the conflict with Hamas and Gaza gives him, meaning Netanyahu, more reason to say that the U.S. assurances aren't good enough to justify pulling back in the West Bank. In other words, oh my God, look at this war I just started. You see how we have no security? So that's why I can't do a peace deal. I mean, you want me to do a peace deal where I'm going to trust the Palestinians aren't going to fire rockets at us. They just fired rockets at us after I provoked them. Wait, did I say that out loud? Okay, actually you did, because here's what Netanyahu himself said. He said, the Israeli people understand now what I always say. There cannot be a situation under any agreement in which we relinquish security control of the territory west of the Jordan River. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the geography there, of course, which is almost all of us, let me fill you in. That's a large part of the West Bank. That means I am not going to trade land for peace. I am not going to do a two-state solution. I will keep that land. Right-wingers on both sides, driving us deeper into war. By the way, Netanyahu's popularity rating skyrocketing now. Last poll I saw, he was at 85% approval for this war. Turns out when you have wars started by the right wing get more popular. Now, I wish the American people, the Israeli people, the Palestinian people all over the world wouldn't fall for that trick, but they do every time. So even though it looks like they devastated Gaza, and what did they really get in return? Turns out the mission might have been accomplished because the mission was more war, so that the more pro-war parties can stay in power. So now we go to a report out of the UK, and they had investigators look in to see what's happening in Gaza and how Israel's treating that area. Here's some of their conclusions. We saw a country whose people have known immense suffering now imposing conditions on their Palestinian neighbors which cause a different but very real suffering and often without real security justification. So now that's a strong ally of Israel saying not only are they punishing collectively the people of Gaza, but without a real security justification. They continue, we saw Israel taking a range of actions that hinder Palestinian economic development and must, at the very least, cause deep resentment on the Palestinian side, even amongst the most moderate and pragmatic people, and so will actually worsen Israel's own security. Now, this is a point we've been making a lot. One, bombing Palestinians doesn't make them more pro-Israel. Shocking. Who could have figured that? It doesn't make them more likely to do a peace deal. Again, that's the whole point, because Netanyahu's government doesn't want a peace deal. And then lastly, does it actually help Israel's own security? No, it clearly doesn't. It drives people to more hatred, which I'm going to get to in a second, because there's a devastating article from a Palestinian reporter that explains, unfortunately, exactly how that's happening. But once again, that was their mission. Okay. So the British International Development Committee continues. The UK should, in concert with other European countries, stress to the Israeli authorities the unacceptability of the present situation. Now, whether they're going to do that is, of course, a different question. Someone from the Foreign Minister's office in the UK resigned today, saying that UK is not an honest broker in this Middle Eastern conflict, that they are taking the side of Israel, right or wrong, and damn the facts. One final note from this report, they say some are contrary to Israel's obligations under international law, their actions, and also run the risk of making the security situation worse. Again, security not better, worse. The war does not accomplish anything if you're interested in Israeli security. What it does accomplish is better approval ratings for warmongers. Now, let's go to the Palestinian side and see what the reaction has been. See if they are now bowing their heads and saying, yes, well, of course, we should do a peace deal with Israel because they're so strong and they keep killing us. It turns out it might have had the opposite reaction. Asma Al-Ghul is a reporter in the Palestinian territories. She also has family there, right? She lives there. She explained that she recently visited her relatives and then she left them, and unfortunately, the very next day, they were killed. And so that's where we pick up the story. She said, my father's brother, Ismail Al-Ghul, was not a member of Hamas. His wife, Kadra, was not a militant of Hamas. Their sons, Wa'il and Muhammad, were not combatants for Hamas. Their daughters, Hanadi, 28, and Asma, 22, were not operatives for Hamas, nor were my cousins Wa'il's children, Ismail, 11, Malak, 5, and baby Mustafa, only 24 days old. Members of the Islamic Jihad, the Popular Front of the Liberation of Palestine, or Fatah. Yet they all died in the Israeli shelling that targeted their home at 6:20 a.m. on Sunday morning. That baby, who was 24 days old, was born with as a twin. He has a twin brother who's still alive, miraculously survived the bombing, but he has passed away, as well as obviously a huge part of the family. So Al-Ghul continues, if it is Hamas that you hate, let me tell you that the people you are killing have nothing to do with Hamas. They are women, children, men, and senior citizens whose only concern was for the war to end, so they can return to their lives and daily routines. But let me assure you that you have now created thousands, no millions, of Hamas loyalists. For we all become Hamas if Hamas to you is women, children, and innocent families. If Hamas in your eyes is ordinary civilians and families, then I am Hamas, they are Hamas, and we are all Hamas. Now let's pause here. Now, does this look like a productive war for Israel? That you have taken the entire population of Gaza and you've bombed them and killed civilians in the process. 75% of the 1,900 people dead are civilians. And now you have made thousands and perhaps millions of more enemies. And you have driven them into the arms of warmongers on the other side. Again, if you're an Israeli citizen, it is a disaster of epic proportions. Now these people will fight you forever. But if you're an Israeli right-winger who feeds off of this and then gets elected and gets a little bit more power for themselves through war, well, then you love this because you just drove Palestinians to permanent war and you're the permanent war party in Israel. So Likud loves this. Netanyahu thinks, great, mission accomplished. Let me end on devastating ending of this article by Asma Al-Ghul. She says, I discovered the photos of my dead relatives on social networking sites. The bodies of my cousin's children were stored in an ice cream freezer. In the photos taken after their death, my family looked so peaceful, asleep with their eyes closed. None of them were disfigured or burned, unlike hundreds of dead children and civilians that U.S.-made weapons killed before. Great, now we've turned them against us as well. We wondered if they died in pain. What happened when the missile carrying tons of explosives impacted their modest house and exploded, creating air pressure so fierce that their internal organs burst. Finally, she says, now the house and its future memories have been laid to waste, its children taken to early graves, homes and recollections bombed into oblivion. their inhabitants homeless and lost, just as their camp always had been, because they were refugees. Never ask me about peace again. So here was a civilian with a civilian family, and now she says, never ask me about peace again. If you're a right-winger on either side, you're a warmonger on either side, you never want peace, well, your mission was accomplished.